Welcome to Geek Warning, the podcast that puts the world's most interesting cycling tech into one place. I'm Dave Rome. Joining me this week, once again, Brad Copeland. Welcome back.
Thank you, Dave. It's always the highlight of my week.
Amazing. It's been a busy few weeks. I mean, the Olympics have now wrapped up, but we're straight back into more cycling events. We've had Leadville, the classic historic mountain bike event, Tour de France, Femmes, Avec Swift. Been some pretty exciting racing. And, of course, with the Olympics done and dusted, we're starting to see brands open up the floodgates of new bikes once again. So, yeah, plenty to talk about. But, Brad, how's your week been? What's been in the stand for you?
We've been getting in a lot of those new Crux DSWs that we talked about a few episodes ago. Not the most thrilling thing in the stand, but we've been seeing those kind of flying off the shelves, so to speak, lately. So it kind of supports our theory about those bikes, but it's a pretty compelling, affordable package. So perhaps no surprises there, but nevertheless, been kind of cranking them through as fast as we can get them in, and they've been trickling in.
That reminds me, my test bike has SRAM Apex mechanical 12-speed.
Mm-hmm. That's what this is.
And on that test bike, it's a little bit finicky. It's a bit crappy at the lower end in the 11 and 12 tooth. And I know that that's just the stock cable because I've got that group set on another bike and it's pretty much flawless in every gear. Are you seeing anything like that, or are they shifting the way they should?
It's like one cog coming from easier to harder gears. It's like the second to last one. A little bit of hesitation.
Okay.
So I've had to do a little bit of enhancement of the cable lubrication, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the ones that we've been getting also have come with sealed ferrules, which are kind of a no-no for me in general. It sort of saves the cable housing from getting stuff inside, but at great expense in the in terms of friction. Yes. So
yeah. So a sealed ferrule being the end cap to your housing, which basically has an O-ring in it, which is a sealing O-ring. But neither Brad nor I, and many mechanics are fans of them because they do create unnecessary friction. So maybe an assembly issue that's not just limited to my test bike.
Maybe so. I've kind of been experimenting with bringing the B tension kind of the gap as close as possible too, since there's no suspension related chain growth or movement there, sag related stuff. You can kind of fudge the gap a little bit closer to just kind of crispify those shifts a little bit better, if you will. I'm not sure that's technically a term, but I think it translates. And I think the feeling is good actually of the Apex kind of shift mechanical feeling, and the feeling of the lever in general. It feels better than they used to. It feels more substantial and solid, and like less cheap would be kind of a not so nice way of putting it, but in a good way, because it's not as cheap as it was, and so now it's better. Yeah. So I think it's decent, and for the price, it's good, and the functionality is there for kind of an expanded range in a one-buy system that's not very expensive. So I'm still saying, there's a lot of good there. So I don't
a lot of good there, but it did stick out to me that my test bike wasn't quite as good as that group set can be, and I'm intrigued now to hear that.
Yeah, I know.
Seeing similar trend.
I found it to be once I start seeing patterns or consistently repeated quirks, then I start to think that there's more to it. But these bikes are coming with like a handlebar off and hydraulic levers where the hoses are super long and have to be cut and bled, and the cables aren't attached and connected. And so there's a lot of
it's stuff what you want on a mid-price gravel bike.
Yeah, you don't have to undo stuff to then do the stuff you need to do to make it work better, which in my case, and perhaps less so in yours, it's workable, but just quirky.
Yeah. For the listeners, I was being sarcastic there because really, as a shop, you often want the bike as closely assembled to right when the cheaper it gets, because often you don't have the margin to play with to spend an extra hour or two bleeding brakes and cutting lines. But hey, here we are. Anyway, well, that wasn't an intentional quest, but we've had it now. Should we jump into some of the big themes for the show? We've just had Leadville. I mean, Leadville's a pretty iconic race in Leadville, Colorado. A high altitude, sort of fast-paced endurance marathon mountain bike race. And it has been for a long time a race of a lot of experimentation. So going back, I think even 15 years ago, Travis Brown, ex-Olympian, raced a dual suspension drop bar mountain bike at the race. And we're sort of seeing that idea come back to the forefront. And the race was, in the men's, was run by Keegan Swenson, who won on a hardtail adapted into what was basically a gravel bike. So yeah, it looked like a mountain bike, but with a party end up front with drop bars. So
is that a party you want to go to though, Dave? That's the question.
I don't know. But yeah, there were a few other riders of note that had done similar things where they were trying to get aero. And do you see this as something that might become a broader trend, Brad, or do you think like this is a Leadville thing?
Well, we could talk about this for a really long time, Dave. I've often been known to say that a cross-country hardtail mountain bike is probably the best option for most gravel because it's so capable and you're rarely going to exceed its capabilities if you're riding on gravel or gravel-like surfaces. But inevitably, you're underbiked at times, or people get a wild idea to do a route that features real single track. And a lot of times these gravel bikes and the equipment aren't quite a lot of times these bikes aren't quite up to it. So that's what I'll start by saying that. And I think a lot of people sort of write off the cross-country category of mountain bikes, maybe not paying close attention to it. I think it's under-marketed. I think the trail bike category is what you kind of hear and see the most about and what people think they want the most. But I would challenge everyone to give a second thought to cross-country category, even the full suspension bikes these days, because what they can do is like mind-blowing compared to even a few years back. In that sense, I'm kind of glad to see this trend in a way. So, back in Travis Brown's day, you mentioned Travis Brown with his drop bar. Mm-hmm. It's been a few years since road controls, shifters, and mountain bike drivetrains could play together, which may be why you haven't seen so many drop bars in between the last, when he sort of famously used it. And now, of course, Axis.
Now you can.
Axis drivetrains, everything pairs.
And GRX mechanical.
And GRX mechanical, yeah, exactly.
Well,
ish with its broad range anyway. It has the ability to be that type of a bike with a mountain bike kind of rear end, mullet, whatever. Mm-hmm. So I think that's cool. I like to see these boundaries or sort of categories blending with the components where you use, optimized setup using parts from one category and another category to kind of get the best of everything, especially in a race as diverse as Leadville, where a lot of it is paved. The dirt roads are, pretty mild, but when they get steep or you start going down, it's often loose because it's quite dry there and washboard kind of surfaces. So you definitely do need a mountain bike at times, but you definitely don't need a mountain bike for a lot of it. So it's kind of no surprise to see people attempting this hybrid setup. But I would say in the case of, Keegan and Russell Finsterwald, who both were riding, drop bar SRAM equipped Axis mountain bikes in Leadville this past weekend. I just think it's kind of a cool use of both sides of the coin, and we kind of did a little bit of that in my life with on the mountain bike side using blip buttons and a blip box, which are kind of a triathlon or time trial product from SRAM, to kind of give ourselves some options as far as how to operate the reverb seat post, the Axis reverb seat posts. And so I think that whole sort of door being open on the Axis side, where all these parts are basically compatible, within, obviously there's 13 speed now, so we have to not say it's all compatible, but close to completely compatible. And so you can really get weird with how you set up your bike if you have an event that's so niche like Leadville and is also not governed by the UCI, where all of these possibilities are allowed. That is
a key thing here, which is UCI events would prohibit because the mountain bike frames aren't UCI approved. But
did you know that the UCI has banned drop bars from mountain bike competition back in the 90s, early 90s? So it's technically not allowed in a UCI sanctioned mountain bike race.
What have you done,
silly goose, with your Tioga disc wheels and your and your drop bar and your downhill skin suits. So those are all things. Maybe I don't know about a disc wheel, if that's technically UCI banned, but skin suits were in downhill racing after a while, as were drop bars on a mountain bike. So that's a nice
dealing with different timelines there. But I think so. Yeah, I mean, like rewinding a bit, like I think the big thing here is that we're seeing gravel racers come up onto the limits of the tire width they want to run on their gravel bikes. So even Keegan, who's on a Santa Cruz, which can fit a 50 mil tire, which is kind of at the upper end of what most gravel bikes can fit, even he seems to be trending towards wanting to run even wider. And that's sort of what then leads him on to the next step, which is a mountain bike. And the downside to this is that the crank width is then a mountain bike crank width. So it's not like this is all of a sudden the new gravel bike, but there are still compromises here. And obviously the biggest compromise is in the geometry. And Keegan's, I heard him speak to having tried it before and struggled to get his fit correct on the bike. And he had to run some pretty strange stuff. Like he had to remove the headset top cap. He ran a really steeply angled stem, like short stem, because the mountain bike reaches are so long, and then you're adding a drop bar reach on top of that. I mean, it can make a pretty long bike. And for someone like Keegan, that's probably of benefit because he runs such an aggressive position, but it probably is quite prohibitive for someone less flexible like me to grab a new mountain bike hardtail, which I have downstairs from me, and put a drop bar on it, which I've definitely considered and done the numbers for. And even with a 50 mil stem, I'm still struggling to get. Yeah, it's basically still going to be too long for me. So yeah, there's limitations here, but I do think we're going to continue to see the convergence of these two categories, gravel and mountain bike, continue to bump up against each other. And I'm certainly hearing from some frame builders. I think Darren Baum is one that I've heard from recently that he's, it's an area he's playing with for sure, like the drop bar mountain bike, a more capable gravel bike. And yeah, certainly it's been on the fringe for a few years, this category, and I think it's becoming more mainstream now. So one to watch. But yeah, the Leadville racing, I think, is probably the most high profile use of these bikes to date.
Yeah, I've been the mechanic for a couple athletes at Leadville over the years, and we've had some fun with the bike setups. And a couple years, I think my first Leadville that I did, we had Todd Wells, a kind of American of note who across many disciplines, a super talented guy, a former Olympian. And he always would do Leadville. He's a Colorado native from Durango, and he actually would run aero extensions, like zip aero, like TT extensions on a mountain bike. That was kind of his, for a number of years, his setup. And so you see all kinds of funny stuff at Leadville that some of it makes sense, some of it less so.
I think last minute there was a decision to outlaw those.
I think has. Yeah, I think it has actually been banned officially. I would say people were trending away from it. He was definitely one of the highest profile guys I saw there doing it. But nevertheless, you do spend a ton of time on open roads and just pounding it out in a somewhat like time trial basically position on your bike. And so a lot of guys even this year obviously still were using like bar tape all across the tops of the handlebars. So you have a pad to sort of rest against and get into your tuck. But
because puppy paws are allowed.
Yeah, there's no real limitations at a race like this because of the UCI's uninvolvement. So it's nice to have some flexibility. I think that's where a lot of progress happens in the bike world. You see in the triathlon side where there's no real restrictions on aerodynamics, you see some pretty unbelievable ideas, some of which may make sense, some of which may make us laugh as we you see some of these unbelievably quirky looking bikes. But nevertheless, it's cool because you get to really push the envelope and see what sticks and what might just be silly. But I think for a race like Leadville, especially for athletes who have unlimited access to the parts bin that guys like Keegan do based on their incredible successes they've been having lately, they have the luxury to set it up and fiddle with all those parts to make it work, which you or my financial restrictions might keep us from being able to pull that off as effectively. So, but still cool.
Also, my flexibility is the other limiting factor. So I've got all the parts here. I just done the numbers, decided it's not worth it. But yeah, I mean, certainly, there have been a long time. It's been comments that new gravel bikes are old mountain bikes, and there is actually some truth when you're looking at this category, this type of gravel bike, like a converted mountain bike, because a 10-year-old 29er is kind of the perfect option here because the frame reach is shorter. The wheel axle is probably a 142, so you can fit modern gravel wheels straight into your old 29er mountain bike. yeah, I mean, the geometry is much more in line with what you want for gravel, and yet you can probably still fit a 2.1, 2.2 inch wide tire in there without taking it too extreme. So yeah, and then on top of that, the Q factor of your crank is narrower than a modern mountain bike because it's of an older chain line. So there's a lot of benefits if you've got a 10-year-old-ish 29er mountain bike in the garage. That might be the perfect bike to convert. So anyway, leave it there. But yeah, I think it is something we'll probably talk about more in future because yeah, Leadville is a unique fringe case, but I do think that this style of bike is going to increasingly become popular as more riders push up against those, wanting to run the widest tire they can, and gravel bikes just not quite allowing that. So watch the space. Brad, speaking of gravel bikes, progressive gravel bikes that kind of seem like mountain bikes and all that, BMC URS has just been updated. So the BMC Unrestricted is what the URS stands for. And yeah, I was actually at the launch in Switzerland for the original URS and rode it, and then consequently tested it yet again at a field test, and then yet again when they released a suspension version of it, front suspension version of it. So I'm pretty familiar with that bike. I haven't ridden the new one, but what's interesting to me is that the geometry hasn't really changed. And I guess for anyone not familiar with that BMC URS, it was kind of the defining gravel bike to be the first to adopt mountain bike geometry concept. So it was the first gravel bike that I'm aware of that went to like a long front center with a short stem length and a slacker head tube angle in the 69.5 degree range. And yeah, I kind of praised it. I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. I said, this is kind of, this is a groundbreaking bike and expect to see others follow, and follow we have seen. But yeah, they've updated it, and I guess proving how right they perhaps had that geometry to begin with. They haven't made any real significant changes in that sense. But yeah, what do you think, Brad? You've had a look at the press release. We've both seen the bike as much as each other.
Yes, it's a great press release. I mean, I have to give credit for just the creative flourishes that were used. It was a thrill to read. Yeah, it's like you say, I don't see a ton of major changes over the previous one, although you did, as you say, called it a category defining bike. So, I mean, in that sense, I think a lot of companies have maybe borrowed some ideas they've seen from BMC actually, rather than maybe the other way around. But 69.5 degree head angle, that's like legitimate mountain bike territory, especially maybe 2 to 3 years ago. But everyone's getting slacker these days. But that's, I mean, I imagine it would not necessarily be prudent to go much slacker than that, although I'm sure the industry will. Yeah,
they have, and we slapped them over the wrist for it. We had on our field test, the same field test I tested the BMC URS for a second time at. We had the Evil Chamois. So Evil entered the gravel market, and they thought it'd be fun to do a 66.6 degree head angle.
Of course they would.
And it just rode not well, should we say. There were other issues with the bike, like the frame was overly rigid, overly stiff. But yeah, that head angle just made it a bit quirky, and weren't very positive about it, James and I, back at the old place. And Evil's response was to show that we were wrong, because they had one of their athletes doing dirt jumps on the bike to show how capable it was, which kind of further proved our point. But yeah, it was quite a funny rebuttal. But anyway, so I feel like after us being like, this is not the future of gravel, like they went too far, I think others have been shy to do it. And thankfully, yeah, I really don't think people need a gravel bike approaching the 66 degree head angle range.
Yeah, I would think not. It makes the bike handle, especially if you're like on long kind of lower speed climbing sections, the sort of peculiar floppy front end characteristics are magnified on a gravel bike. I feel like that would be something you're doing a lot of, is climbing for long periods of time at low speeds. And so 69.5, that's a pretty low number, and I would expect to see other people approach it, but I would be shocked to see it go much lower than that on the gravel side. Yeah. Or are we calling this an all-road bike with the 47 millimeter tire restriction?
You can call it whatever you want, Brad. Yeah, we can just further confuse the categories of all-road and gravel.
I'm so confused.
They're all the same now.
Yes.
But yeah, so yeah, I guess this bike, they've upped the tire clearance. It was 42 mil. They've increased it to 47. So still not leading there, but better. And yeah, the URS, one of the defining features of the URS was their MTT suspension. So it's basically like a little soft tail suspension. The seat stays of the bike are basically disconnected, and then there's like an elastomer in between them that allows it to move, and they sort of run on 2 little sliding bushings. They've kept that system, but they've improved it by allowing you to now adjust how firm that system is. And then, the top end models of the URS now have, or they're continuing to have the Redshift ShockStop stem in the front. So you've got suspension through that as a stock feature. So very smooth is what I'm hearing. And yeah, hopefully we'll have a little bit of a first look on our website via a freelancer who's at the event for us. And not sure on timing of that because apparently they're stuck in a hut up in the mountains somewhere in Steamboat with no Wi-Fi, which is not conducive to creating press content. But anyway.
We'll and for those keeping score, it does have the UDH, Universal Derailleur Hanger, so future compatible for all your 13-speed wireless electronic needs and wants.
Yep. Yes. And it also has a storage hatch in the down tube to keep your spare batteries.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, integrated storage, it's kind of the new normal, but nevertheless, I really do actually like that kind of Softail concept. They also may have debuted actually on a cross-country sort of mountain bike, semi-hardtail.
It did. It came from their hardtail under Julian.
Yes. Yeah, so it's had plenty of race success, but it's a cool concept, and I like that you can kind of tune the firmness of it as well. That's, I would say, a needed option, because I think when you have squishy bikes like this, that's a matter of taste. And I think some of the like specialized kind of Future Shock Diverge front end, it's a little bit sometimes too squishy for my liking. Too much cushion for the pushing, shall we say? And so anyway, that being said, I like the firmer, but I still like the concept of a Softail bike in general. I think that's kind of underutilized, especially with what we can do with tuning how carbon performs these days.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, the BMC mountain bike, the hardtail, the Team Elite, did actually have adjustable firmness to it. They offered different elastomers, and then when they released the URS came after that, and it didn't have that you couldn't tune it. And I thought that was a bit peculiar, but it was just like a one weight fits all kind of thing. So yeah, it's nice to see that they've invested in having other elastomers made for this. So yeah, and that's actually a random tangent. Is I actually just did this in the past week for someone. If you do have a BMC URS, remember that, or any bike with moving components, just remember that if it moves, it needs service. So yeah, this URS hadn't had it done before, but yeah, there are little steel pins in there that slide into bushings, and they do need to be cleaned and greased. So if you've got one of these bikes, maintain it. It doesn't take too long. You just need some Allen keys. But yeah, it's worth keeping in mind if you're buying one of these or you own one, that it's anything that moves should be addressed as such. That's not a PSA, but you can have it as one, because I don't think we have a PSA this week. Brad, I mentioned spare batteries before. That brings something up on my mind that I've been listening to the buzz of electric battery operated tire inflators all week, and prior to that too. But I'm getting close to wrapping up my next threaded, which will publish basically the same time that this podcast drops. It will be live, and yeah, it's all about electric tire inflators, and I'm comparing the ones that I have. I think I've got my hands on 10 of them.
Wow.
But more and more seem to be flooding into the market at the moment, and it feels like I spent years telling everyone how great they are, and everyone ignored me and said how gimmicky they are, and now all of a sudden they're trendy. So anyway, it's the day is now. And Brad, I think you are also a fan of said electric tire inflators. So why are you a fan of them?
Yeah, I'd like to say I'm an early adopter. We've mentioned it a time or two in previous episodes together, Dave. And although it sounds like with 10 on your power strip charging simultaneously and creating a fire hazard, you probably have a little more experience with the full scope of what's on offer. But the ones that I've had experience with, I've been very pleased with. It's a super portable thing. It's a little bit, it's not, I wouldn't replace your floor pump altogether with one of these things. There's a time and a place, but for maintaining a set pressure or, actually the Foompa pump I have, you can go from 0 to fully inflated many times over on a mountain bike volume tire. So, it's actually amazing. And if you have a good tape job or the contact is reasonable enough inside, you can actually inflate a tubeless tire with, it's powerful enough. So it's actually quite impressive. But, even in the last I don't know, 8 years at least, I would say. It's super common in cyclocross pits anywhere all around the world, especially the Bosch one, which has a preset feature. I used that one for a long time, where you can actually set the PSI and it cuts off when it gets there, which is a cool feature, especially if you have mini bikes and wheel sets that you're fumbling between as you would as a cyclocross mechanic. And so, but yeah, I mean, it's just a really easy, straightforward way with some functionality that you don't get with a floor pump. And if you get one that's high quality with good digital accuracy, it's probably better than a floor pump for a lot of applications.
Yeah, I see the ones with the gauges almost like a pressure gauge that inflates.
Right, exactly. That's. I mean, we basically standardized our pressures around the Bosch pump for a number of seasons. Of course, I think with every pump and every gauge that you have, there's some published, variability in the accuracy, which hopefully within a small range, if it's a good quality item. But even, two like products that are side by side may register slightly different. So you have to, if you're racing and you're splitting hairs between half a PSI or whatever the case may be, it's nice to have the same pump or pressure gauge or combination of the two in the form of a Fumpo or similar. But yeah, but it is accurate and repeatable, and we would measure these things and have them tested and calibrated. So it's a product that I have very few flaws to report. I've used the Fumpo one now for a couple of years, and it's an amazing thing. And so yeah, for its size, it does a lot. So
spoiler alert, the Fumpo is my favorite, and this threaded explains why. Like it'll have all the data of the testing of all the 10 pumps and how, the speed of them and the max pressures and all that. But yeah, the Fumpo it just draws more from the battery. So it's faster to use. It doesn't go, it doesn't do as many repeated in full inflations as some other pumps, but it'll, do the inflations twice as quick as a result of that. So, and for me, that's kind of the idea of it is like, I use it instead of a floor pump, before a ride, I'll just quickly connect it and zip in an extra 1 or 2 PSI and you're ready to go. Whereas with a floor pump, you connect it, it backfills the pump, you lose a few pressure, you lose a few PSI, you then, pump up a few strokes and then disconnect and hope you don't, hope the valve doesn't mess it up. And then, some people also own floor pumps they don't trust, so then they're connecting a pressure gauge after that. So this just removes a whole lot of that process and just turns it into, 3-4 second quick press of a button and away you go. So big fan. I've been using them. I've actually been using Fumpa so long that I had Fumpa serial number 3.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You're so cool, Dave.
I know, right? And so I'm on to my third one now. I had the original, which had the proprietary plug, which I didn't love, and that annoyed me having to take a separate plug when I traveled, and then they updated to micro USB, and now they're USB-C, and little tweaks along the way, but it's still a very similar product. And but yeah, just in very recent time, they've gotten a lot of copycat competition, should I say, and maybe some patent related disputes going on in the background, but from a consumer point of view, it means that there's more options and more competition than ever before. So it's an interesting space all of a sudden.
I look forward to reading your article, Dave, and enlightening myself about all that I've missed in the electric pump space.
Oh, I don't think you've missed much.
Spoiler alert.
You're on the winning one already. So,
right.
But anyway. Well, now that we've discussed how cool I am with my Fumpa, shall we move on?
Let's see if we can back this up.
All right. Well, speaking of inflation, no, I've got nothing there. Well, we haven't had a pick one for a while, Brad, and I thought I would get you to pick one bar tape. So do you have a favorite bar tape that you would lead someone to if you were in the workshop and a customer walked in and didn't have a preference for bar tape? What would you lead them toward?
Oh, Dave, I have a funny tendency, and this came up again in conversations about my use of tubular tires and stuff daily. Sometimes the things that I prefer aren't what I would recommend to other people because I'm aware of the quirky choices and justifications for making them. But
okay. Go on.
My preference, personally, is Physique Soft Touch Microtex tape. It's kind of like the micro suede texture. Do you know what I mean? It's very, very thin.
Yeah.
Almost no padding, but it's extremely light And Dave, sometimes I build bikes for that reason, where comfort is not the priority. I do sometimes wear gloves too.
I am starting to wince.
I know.
I'm starting to wince at your choice.
That's why I
haven't been able to
as such.
Yeah,
but it depends on the bar shape and the ergonomics of the actual bar. Yeah,
yeah. So that tape's been around for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
I once upon a time, back when I was fitter and a lot dumber,
Mm-hmm.
I entered a mountain bike race. This is before gravel. I entered a marathon mountain bike race, 120 kilometer mountain bike race, and decided, myself and about 10 others did this, decided that I would use a cyclocross race bike. So cantilever, 33 mil tires, and I took it a step further and I wore a skin suit and wore no gloves and used that physique bar tape.
Ooh.
And at about the 70 or 80K point, I still have memories of pulling over on the side of a downhill, a long extended downhill, stepping off my bike, looking at my hands, sitting down and just crying. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure I gave myself like long-term nerve damage as a result of that ride.
Mm-hmm.
But my hands were bruised, like blue and black, for a few weeks after the event. So anyway, as a result of that, I now am traumatized by your bar tape choice.
Well, I might just point out that could possibly not have been the best application for this tape.
I think you may be right, Brad.
So
I think you may be
maybe don't paint with such a broad stroke. But I should preface, or it's not really a preface anymore, but I should say that I would only use that on a road bike, first of all.
Sure.
Where weight is a bit more of a consideration. And I just like how cleanly it tapes. It's like very smooth, very sleek profile. Doesn't have lumps that some other thicker padded tapes can kind of be a little more lumpy in their appearance. So my choices are not always based on like pure just how does it feel in my hand. It's more to it than that.
Yeah. I actually wrapped some of that tape recently, and I actually find that it doesn't have a lot of stretch, so it's hard to get the it's should I say it's easy to get it creases in it at points of around the bar curve. So any tips to avoid that?
Practice makes perfect, Dave. Repeated acts always just help to clean those little things up over time. But yeah, I mean, a little tension goes a long way. Kind of finding what I like about the tape also is the little perforated center bits, the little dots. I think it looks so cool. It's kind of classic, kind of old school looking in a way. And I kind of use those dots to kind of help guide each, revolution of bar tape. And once you kind of get a feeling for the tape, you kind of know where to line it up so you don't get creases and you get plenty of overlap without it slipping or sliding and creating a gap later. So I think with all tape, it's a bit of a touch game, and they all have their unique characteristics and maybe little tips that might make one brand or another, wrap cleaner than it might. So yeah, so that's my favorite tape, and it's kind of harder to find now. It's like kind of, I think, so underused for people who've probably done things like you, Dave, where they use it and then went on a bumpy ride and it hurt them, which it definitely will do. And I wouldn't. It's an
understatement in my case.
Yeah, but I come from kind of mountain bike side and kind of got accustomed to riding with gloves and stuff, and do some stuff too that's like old fashioned, let's say. So I think I can get away with a little bit better too if I have a little bit of padding on my hands that is not on my handlebar. But so I kind of like the texture of lizard skins tape. The DSP tape is also quite a lightweight tape, if that's something that even crosses your mind. I don't like though that it like kind of gets distressed and kind of wears out quickly. It doesn't really last.
It delaminates.
It delaminates from the backing, like the foam side, and the top kind of rubbery textured side will peel, and it's very expensive.
It is, yeah. Bar tape is very expensive now.
It's gotten like twice as expensive in like the
Yeah.
last 5 years. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I can't believe how much it costs. It's a shame too, because I always feel like people really should replace it way more often than they do. Like everybody's bar tape's so ragged out, and like the finishing tape on top is always like a mess. It's a relatively cheap thing. Or it was, but
a big difference. Yeah,
it makes a huge difference. It's kind of like replacing your chain, even if it's not super worn out. Just the way that it makes your bike feel, and like the whole performance of everything, and the shifting and the feeling of the drivetrain. It's like, wow, I didn't even realize it was like this bad until I suddenly did this. And it's the same. It's the same. It can really bring a smile to your face to have such a nice, pleasant feeling in your hands, and just refresh it once in a while, people, because it'll make you feel better about yourself.
Brad,
Yes.
the physique microfiber stuff,
Yeah.
soft touch, is your personal preference. But what are you putting onto customer bikes if they don't have a preference?
So
what's your go-to there?
Yeah, that's how we should have asked this question, isn't it? Sometimes leaving my opinions out of things will just
you've
eliminate.
had your pick one, but now pick one for someone else.
So lately, I don't know if the one I've been using lately is the Supakaz tape.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I say it with that tone in my voice because I'm kind of, so like you say about how it doesn't have a lot of stretch, it can get kind of wrinkly. I think that is actually what I would say about the Supakaz tape, even more so.
It's a bit harder to wrap.
Yeah, it can still be done, but kind of the texture of it also makes it a little bit tricky because it grips itself more. And so it really, if there is a little bit of a wrinkle, like it really kind of grabs it and folds it over, and so it's like really, you got to pay a little more attention. If you have a few decades of working on bikes in your hands and some proneness to carpally tunnely type feelings in your thumbs, as some of us may.
I thought it was just me.
Yeah. Sometimes wrapping that tape actually makes my hands hurt. So I think it feels good on the bike. Like it has a nice grip, especially for like a gravel bike, because it's a little rubbery. So if you're actually like steering more than you're just like resting on it like a road bike handlebar you often are. I feel like it's a nice grippy tape with some padding, but not too much. So it kind of is like a happy medium, and it seems like pretty durable. But I don't know. And then, if it's an older bike, I also like to kind of keep the sort of aesthetic appropriate for the period of the bike. So I always keep some just Chinelli black cork. I think they call it cork ribbon, but black, like kind of very with traditional black.
With the gel backing or the adhesive backing?
Adhesive backing, because it's thinner. Again, this is a trend here. I'm a thin tape guy. Yeah, but it's thick enough. It's thick enough.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that Chinelli tape's a classic. I love to wrap with that stuff.
Me too.
Yeah, for me, like I guess some of my preference is just around ease of wrapping, and I do like a bar tape with a little bit of stretch for that reason. So yeah, my pick one would be Zip Service Course tape, which is kind of like a Velo manufactured tape. So there's a lot of other bar tapes out there in the market that actually are very similar to this one. But yeah, Zip Service Course, and they do one called the CX, which has more traction on it. It's a grippier version, and that's the one I tend to go for. And yeah, not a lot of color choice in that one. It's also gone up in price quite a bit lately. It's no longer a cheap tape, but yeah, as far as ease of wrapping and staying put and durability and all that's my top pick. And then there's others out of the house of Velo that are approaching my appreciation of the zip tape in similar ways. So like Envy also I think is in that category, and yeah, there's a few others, but yeah, I think that's the pick one. Find the tape you like.
Yeah,
be a joke about it.
I like to hear. I don't care what tape it is, as long as you have a justification for why. That's what I want to hear about. As long as you can tell me why you chose it, then I can be happy with your choice.
Yeah, I feel like I've done this before, but pet peeves of tape. I really dislike tape that disintegrates when you unwrap it.
Yes, and leaves the sticky stuff just like cemented to the bar. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
And there's some very high end tapes that I've found to be guilty of this. Like I have experienced it with Silka tape. I think I've experienced it with like Berg, which is this Australian brand that has really beautiful tape, like great feeling, easy to wrap, but unfortunately does disintegrate when you take it off the bar. So yeah, unfortunately some really nice tapes suffer from this, and I wouldn't say it's going to be a deal breaker, but it is annoying. But then the other one is just too many bar tapes don't give you enough length these days.
Yes, it's like right to the very end. You sometimes have to even unwrap and get creative to actually extend it a little bit farther. It's as if they're all sizing it based on like a 42 centimeter 25.4 diameter handlebar from the like a round old skinny handlebar, and like very few bikes now have that. Most bikes now have flat tops, which require more length, and like a modern flare wide. Yeah. I know. I've noticed this too, and I also wonder if there's like some penny pinching in the marketing department, or in the the accounting department, where they've realized that if they cut a couple centimeters off each roll for a couple thousand rolls, then they've saved themselves
literal cost cutting.
Yeah. So I imagine it's some combination thereof, but perhaps they haven't updated their links also relative to the modern bar trends, which at least on the gravel side are quite a bit more tape required to wrap one fully. So yeah, I guess road bars are trending a little narrower, so maybe there's some compensation on that side, but it's hard to use
also arrow.
hard to use a 8-inch segment of leftover bar tape to complete your roll. So
yeah, more length, please. I mean, there are some gravel bar tapes out there that solve this, but it'd be nice if just everyone just gave a bit more length. And I think, anyway, well, that was our pick one, pick many, pick some of the bar tapes.
We should change the name. We never pick one. We always pick like 3.
No,
or
pick
4.
3. Yeah,
pick 3.
Yeah. I'm gonna to steal marketing words from Trek is good, better, best. Yeah, that from their retail point of view, they'd have 3 options, and that is how they instructed their dealers to sell. So maybe we could just blatantly steal that and pick 3 in future. But we might have to come up with a budget option. So
Chinelli, the Chinelli tape, that's my budget option.
Chinelli,
but it's good for more than just that. Mm-hmm. That might be my pick one, actually. Now that we've really gotten to the bottom of this, maybe that's my number 1 overall of all time tape. Chinelli cork ribbon, simple, plain old.
It is, Yeah. I prefer the gel version of that tape, but yes, I agree with you. It's fantastic. And my speaking of budget things, we have been accused of only ever talking about expensive things. Chinelli is actually very affordable tape, and then the other one, very similar to that zip tape but cheaper, is Velo actually do their own grips version of that tape. So it comes in Velo packaging and can be a little hard to find, but is roughly half the price of zip tape. And I would say almost as good, a little thinner, still very easy to wrap, still stretchy, but I've found it to be less durable than the zip tape. So I'd say still spend the extra. Brad, I think it's time for Ask a Wrench. And it's a segment we brought back last week. It had been a long time since we'd had it. Previously in its own episodes, now part of the weekly Geek Warning. And as a reminder, if you're a member of Escape Collective, you can submit a question. Head to escapecollective.com/hello, and you can actually leave a voice-based question for us. Please introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, then ask your question. Try keep it brief. Roughly a minute is great. With that, Brad, I'm going to play a question from someone who didn't introduce themselves, but they basically have a tech question. They're lucky number 1, first person to use the /hello function. So here we go.
I cannot for the life of me get rid of this chirping. It sounds like a bird chirping. I'm going to play it for you. I'm very happy there's an audio submission now. Check it out.
All right, so this member gave a bunch of other information, but to cut to the chase, basically goes on to explain that he, in trying to solve this, had oiled the pulley wheels because that was apparently a common cause for such a squeaky noise. They tried greasing the pedals. They tried greasing the through axles. They serviced the bottom bracket. They've changed the chain, and they have said it's not the rear wheel or cassette because it also happens when they're on their indoor trainer, which replaces the rear wheel. So largely happens under torque on climbs, and it is on a SRAM mullet-equipped gravel bike. Brad, any ideas?
Yeah, so I do have some ideas, Dave. So it's interesting. It was a good use of the audio feature of this question asking because you could actually play the sound, and props to you for being able to repeat it when necessary, which is not always the case, of course, with mystery sounds. And it seems also to be troubling this very person who has taken his bike into the shop and they can't quite figure it out. But I have some ideas. So it's kind of a high-pitched, chirpy sound. It sounds rhythmic on the audio. We can't actually see him pedaling, but it sounds rhythmic to me. Would you agree, Dave? Rhythmic. Mm-hmm. We don't know what bike it actually is either, which would be some information that might be worth sharing in future questions that are asked. It'd be good to know. It happens when the wheel is not in the bike and the bike's on a stationary trainer, so we can kind of assume that's not it. However, sometimes those high-pitched squeaky sounds are from seal drag, and there are a lot of little rubber seals on your bike. The one that strikes me as a possibility, and of course we don't know what pedals are in use here. I assume when he greased his pedals, he greased the pedal threads into the crank arm. There's often a little rubber seal around the spindle of the pedal, which makes some contact with the body of the pedal, which spins, especially at somewhat lower speeds, like you might be when you're climbing. And if you're in the workshop, he might only be touching the right pedal to pedal the bike in the work stand. So my guess is it's the left pedal. but it's a pure guess. But there is a depending on what kind of pedal you have, Crank Brothers maybe, HT pedals were commonly squeaky from a kind of a wiper sealer, like a dust seal.
Even a Shimano can do it.
Even a Shimano can do it. Yeah, for sure. But it's a relatively common sound, and some pedals too, the mechanism itself may develop some creaks. Like a Crank Brothers, again, with the kind of coiled spring around the body, those things are notoriously crusty and they get kind of dried out. So that's something I clean and lube when I service bikes with those pedals. I use a dry, like wax-based lube in there too, so it doesn't like attract more dirt in and hold it there like a oil type lube might do. But take a look at the rubber seals if you have them on your pedals. I've resolved it with just a little bit of grease in there. It's a simple thing that will probably come back over time because it's somewhat inevitable. But it's a common one that's overlooked and often is a source of high-pitched squeaky sounds like that. And your wheels, your hubs may also have a similar type of a rubber kind of seal if you have a Shimano hub and it's old. So it could be the same type of drag like squeal from another source, but that might be something to look at considering what all else you've already looked at.
Brad, I think you and I have honed in on the exact same thing, which is willing to bet some small amount of money. I will bet a medium quality hex key on this. That's not a lot of confidence actually. But anyway, I think it's the pedals, and I think it is, if it's not the seal of the pedal, I think it's the cleat interface, because being a gravel bike, this has probably got a mountain bike style pedal. It's probably running an SPD, given that what 90% of people, 95% of people use. And the SPD interface can actually squeak between the cleat and the pedal body. I actually have this sound going on at the moment as I'm trying to figure out, I'm doing long-term testing on like the Favero mountain bike pedals, and they've just started to develop this same noise. So, I think try swapping out the pedals, or maybe try new cleats.
Maybe just ride your bike with tennis shoes on.
Ride your bike with tennis shoes on. If that goes away, and that would explain why the shop can never find it, because they're not clipping into your pedals.
So that was my next guess too, was change your shoes and ride it again. Because so it's either left pedal or clipped inness has been a factor here. And my question, which we do not know, is whether you were riding your bike when you recorded your audio question in the first place, or if you were just sitting next to it and pedaling it in a work stand. So that I would like to know, for that reason, Dave, if the sound occurred only when he was riding the bike, and if that's how he was recording it, because it should be easy enough to isolate that variable anyway. Change your shoes and ride again and see.
Brad, do you have any tips for people that are having that squeaking interface between the cleat and the pedal body? Have you found any solutions there? I know some people have used different brands of cleats and reckon it fixes it. I don't have any confident solutions there.
I don't really recommend using a third-party brand of cleat, like a SPD compatible cleat with a Shimano pedal. I would just use the Shimano cleat, and I would recommend everyone use the brand of cleat that's the manufacturer of your pedal makes for that pedal. That's usually one way to eliminate problems. I think sometimes when you run a random kind of non-brand specific cleat, it can actually create some less than perfect fit or feeling in the interface. But clean your pedals often. Like you can use like a little bit of light oil or like a degreaser and like a little toothbrush or a small brush like that to kind of scrub them out, scrub out the springs and the little mechanism in there too, because they can all get packed up with gritty dirt. And sometimes, and I've actually seen this happen in like marathon races too, like where dry conditions, water crossings, sand, all these factors over several hours of mountain biking can kind of get in the mechanism so much so that it can become hard to actually clip out, because the spring, there's so much friction there, or maybe some sand particles or something that are like actually preventing some movement to a certain degree can actually, if you let it go too long without cleaning your pedals, can actually have some noticeable performance, suffering from the neglect. And it's kind of an overlooked part of the bike, I would say, in general,
for sure,
from a service side of things. So clean them. I wouldn't like spray them hard with the hose. Obviously, there's bearings in there, so you want to avoid that. And in fact, cleaning and spraying with the hose could exacerbate this little squeaky sound we suspect might be coming from a possible seal drag, where what little bit of grease may have been there once is no longer there. Could just be from miles and miles of riding, but spraying it with a hose certainly can exacerbate that too. So be careful there. But yeah, I would say, Dave, again, like I said, with the Crank Brothers cleats in general, I wouldn't use like a wet lube or an oil on the pedals because it will attract particles. And when you're standing on it, two metal surfaces with sand in between never works well. Yes. And some pedals are, time attack pedals are famously composite bodied and would develop a deep groove in them from clipping out over time on the mountain bike side back in the day. So you definitely don't want to have more dirt and grit than you need, but a little bit of like dry lube, like a wax-based chain lube. That was kind of the speed play on the road side. The speed play lube of choice was basically like a lightweight wax lube that
made by Finish Line. Yeah,
exactly. And it may be a rebranded version of some other lube that might exist on the market under a different name. So, but yeah, so that's kind of where I derived my fix. It's not a permanent fix, but it may resolve it for a little while and be something you do once in a while on your bike just to keep it quiet.
Well, let's move on to the second question. But yeah, pedals. I think we're both Brad and I agreeing on that. So yeah, try different pedals, try different shoes. All right, next question. This is from Dusty Spokes. I'm guessing not their real name, but cool if it is.
It would be awesome.
From Akron, Ohio. Since Cross is coming, in quotation marks, of course, what lubricant would you suggest? What lubricant would be your suggestion, and how best to keep it clean for muddy races? Is immersion waxing a viable option?
Well, Cross is definitely coming. I glued 3 Cross tubulars today.
Whoa.
Finished. Started. It's a multi-day affair, but I wrapped it up. It was eye-opening for my palm calluses, which had not gone through all that in a while. So Cross is here as far as I'm concerned. I think Cross races are actually a great, they're short enough. In other words, they're a good distance for immersion chain waxing to still be good in wet, nasty conditions. I think that is where immersion chain waxing in general could potentially suffer in some types of cycling disciplines like longer mountain bike races. My experience with that type of chain lube is that they tend to break down after about an hour or so, and then you start to get it's
extreme conditions.
It's mostly gone. And so we experimented with chain lubes quite a bit on the mountain bike side. Those races typically last between an hour and 15 minutes and an hour and a half, and especially with mountain bike drivetrains and the types of loads in a race that they're exposed to. When there's a lot of mud and not much lube left, it can really exacerbate the tendency for like chain suck and jamming to occur. And so we found just really heavy weight oil, which is nasty, nasty stuff, but it would still be present at the end of the race. So it depends a bit on the conditions and how long you're riding for. But with a cyclocross race being about 45 minutes to pushing an hour for most folks, I would say you could probably get a wax chain through to the finish and it would still be performing pretty well, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And, with the option too, if you have 2 bikes and you can, get a little hose off in between, then I would say, it would probably be pretty perfect for that.
Yep. So I've actually just pulled up some old Friction Facts data, which is done from 2013 at this point. So it's not new, but Friction Facts is kind of like the original independent source for a lot of chain lube stuff. And the reason why I pulled it up is I remember I wrote about this at the old place, and they actually did a test based on a cyclocross race where they started with a bunch of riders and tried different lubes on the same course and then tested the chains before and after. And there's some pretty big frictional losses if you're running like a wet oil versus a wax. So they definitely found that a drip-on wax or even immersion wax was a superior option for an hour in the mud. Whereas like a Morgan Blue race oil seems to come with a pretty significant drop. You're basically losing about 4 watts by the end of the race through at about a 250 watt output. So not insignificant.
I would say too, though, that the choice of lube may not be 100% based on friction, though. And we would find it was actually shifting performance would degrade heavily.
Interesting. Okay.
Once the chain had been ridden for about 45 minutes or so using wax chains on mountain bikes. It's a tough variable to isolate because all mud is different and courses can be different, and but it was more in the shifting and like chain retention or like the smoothness of the drivetrain functionality as opposed to friction losses, which is why we would actually choose it specifically. But if you see a dry race, we would use sometimes factory wax chains or like a Ceramic Speed UFO chain, for example, or something from ice friction. I've used those when the conditions were not wet, but typically in wet conditions we would go, even though it's slower, admittedly slower.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well then there's no easy answer to that. I would probably suggest trying the wet
I would try
stuff though.
Yeah, for cyclocross, I would try it because I think the race distance you'd probably get there, and it'd be kind of getting nasty towards the end of it, but it would be probably a short enough race that I think it would actually be good because it is so much cleaner and it would be faster, definitely. So
and then your cleanup is literally like you basically pouring boiling water over your drivetrain, and it's back to fresh again, and then you can choose how to wax it from there, whether it's a drip lube or taking the chain off. So, but yeah, the cleanup is very easy at that point. So, all right. Well, should we move on to lucky third? Last question for this week. And all right. So Ads from Brisbane asks or tells, I recently broke a set of carbon bars during install, and it got me thinking, what was your most expensive workshop mistake, and how did you take care of the customer? This could be an embarrassing one to answer.
I'm trying to think of like something I've done to a customer bike. I crashed a new bike on a test ride.
Nice.
One time. Yeah. This was early in my development as a bicycle mechanic. This is an important lesson to learn the hard way, I guess. But
I never did that, but I know I definitely worked with someone who wrote off a really nice time like 15 years ago.
This was probably 20 years ago. It was a Cannondale. It was a Cannondale mountain bike hardtail, and I was just really unnecessarily going for an aggressive test ride on a paved surface with knobby tires. Just got super loose in a corner, just washed out completely, like slid across the parking lot. Like a guy saw me do it. It was an aluminum bike, and so top tube was obviously contacted by the turned handlebar, which dented it massively, broke the broke the brake lever, or at least bent it so badly that it couldn't be salvaged. And but yeah,
you felt like an asshole after that.
Yeah, hell yeah. I was like 14, so I couldn't really afford it anyway. As it was like something to have to. So anyway, the good news was they showed me some mercy and they let me keep working there, and I didn't have to pay for it myself. So that's where I didn't feel. Cool. I didn't actually suffer for it other than the shame. But maybe they could tell that the amount of shame I was experiencing was enough to not then burden me with some financial extras. So that was the one that kind of I remember, but it was not a person's bike that I damaged yet. So
okay.
What about you?
Nothing.
Well, I need to think about this more. I mean, I've like probably over tightened a seat post, and like cracked it.
What did you do in that scenario?
We just replace it. I mean, you never. It's never their fault. It kind of sucks because like sometimes it may have already been a little bit cracked, but then you tighten it back to torque, and then it like you see it. You never know. I've broken spokes when like the spoke nipple and spoke thread has sort of seized together, and you try to turn the spoke nipple and it just snaps under tension, and it's the whole thing kind of like it's very loud and kind of surprising right in your face. So
especially with Mavic or Fulcrum wheels, it can happen.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the old Cerium wheels were.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they definitely do that, and then that's especially on like if it's a rear wheel, which it probably always is going to be just by virtue of the way the universe works. You have to take the cassette off, take probably a rotor off, take the tire off, take the rim strip out, and start over. So it's like an hour down the toilet if you do something like that. But of course, it's not specifically their fault, even though better care or maintenance may have prevented it. You can't really blame them. So in those moments, you just take your losses, and that's what happens sometimes.
Yeah, I'd say like from a business point of view, I mean, this is kind of what public liability insurance is meant to cover. If you like had a really, really expensive issue where like you're cranking on a bottom bracket and you snap someone's carbon frame, I mean, that's basically most shops would have insurance to cover the cost of that and look after the customer. But yeah, things like that are really rare. But for me, I have a recent one, which I'm almost too embarrassed to share it, but it was quite recent and it's still a little painful. So we're only talking weeks ago.
Okay. It was not this morning. Okay.
It was not this morning. No. But because this is this morning as I'm talking.
Oh, right.
So
true.
No, I don't start working on bikes at 5 a.m. I was servicing the rear hub of a friend's wheel, a specialized wheel with a entry-level DT Swiss 370-ish internals in it, and the bearings were completely trashed and rusted, and my general method of getting those bearings out is to rest the hub onto a Hope hub support, which is like this plastic line tool, which gives a nice comfortable spot for the hub, and then use specialist bearing extractors to take the bearing out. But this bearing wasn't coming out, and I guess I wasn't paying enough attention, and I ended up basically cracking the hub shell for where it rested against. Never done it before. Worked on DT Swiss hubs for 20 years, but so ended up cracking the hub shell against the hub support without the bearing budging. So basically the outcome of that was I bought my friend a 350 hub. I upgraded them because I felt generous, because I felt like a fool for doing this to their wheel. I was out of pocket the hundreds of dollars for that, and then they wanted a new rim laced on anyway, and so they paid for spokes and the rim, and I would have done the same thing for a customer, to be honest.
Yeah, no good deed goes unpunished, Dave. Right.
Yeah. The unfortunate thing is like if you did that for a customer, you'd earn that customer for life. But this just being a friend, they're like, oh, thanks. So
don't you have a million of these lying around your garage anyway? Yeah. We had another mechanic at a shop of mine back in the day. Was pressing in some BB30 bearings into a Cannondale road frame and like got them lined up wrong and wasn't looking and paying attention and didn't really pay attention to how it felt, I guess, either, and just totally like compressed and crushed like the internal part of the frame. It's like an aluminum kind of bonded and inserted in a carbon frame, just absolutely destroyed it. And leverage is a powerful thing on those threaded pressing tools and bearing extracting tools. So, but anyway, Cannondale in that case actually not only warrantied it, but gave him, it was like a original Super 6. He got the Super 6 Evo, got the upgrade.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So again, I mean,
nice.
I guess we ate the cost on probably building him a new bike up from the frame that he got. So, but it never really ends that badly. There's like you say, a lot of support for mistakes like these to be made, and it's inevitable in the shop over time. You're going to do something. So the best you can do is pay close attention and minimize the amount of silly mistakes you make, but you'll never
minimize the amount of silly mistakes you make. And there are ways to do that. Like, paying attention to how you clamp bikes is a big one. If it's a painted seat post or something like that, then using something like a hero bell or a more traditional race stand rather than clamping straight onto the seat post is kind of one way to avoid expensive damage. Or using torque wrenches is another common one. Another good way to avoid this. But I think fundamentally it's like acknowledging when you do screw up and looking after the customer, I think, is the main thing here. And I'd like to think that most people listening, if they do work in shops, would do this. But I think, acknowledge that everyone makes mistakes and step up when you do and make it right. So
take the loss and make it right. It's going to come back to you in the end, probably, hopefully.
Well, Brad, I'd still like to do a few little quick tech bites if possible. Are you able to hang out for a little longer?
I'm keen to do some tech bites.
We're nearly there. So I think let's get the bad e-bikes out of the way first. So we've yet again, this is a theme, we're yet again seeing a major car manufacturer release a shitty e-bike. What do we have this time?
The Ford Bronco. Looks like
and the Mustang.
Yeah, right. I like the Bronco personally. I'm a Bronco guy. Okay. I like how it looks like it has like a moto style seat. It's like a spur. Like what do you call it? It's like it's just like it looks almost like the fender, like the spoiler kind of, not spoiler, but like the back end of like a motocross
dirt bike. Yeah.
I think it's awesome.
You like this?
Crappy. I love it. No, I mean, not really, but I think it's at least it looks kind of interesting. But yeah, it's obviously a huge kind of turd. So I wonder why they keep doing this. I mean, I guess there's some market data to support this venture for all these companies, I guess. I say that with complete uncertainty, but they're all jumping on the bandwagon, it seems like, and this one kind of is as Ford gets, I would say, too. So it's kind of an imposter through and through.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I see these things as like a checkbox at a dealership. When someone's buying their new car, they check the box and they get the matching bike, and then it sits in their garage for eternity. But yeah, I don't know. I still, all of these bikes underwhelm me in one way or another, and a lot of them, understandably do aesthetic cues to try and match them to the car or match them to the car brand, but in the end, they just end up being compromised as a result of it. So, yeah, I
also feel like none of these car brands. Yeah, it's a gimmick. Exactly how it looks. It doesn't really pay homage to like the quality of some of these brands that are doing it. I mean, we had like some more high end car brands that have released some bikes like this recently. McLaren among them as perhaps the most notable of those, which was a total piece of crap. The bike, the cars are great, and you'd think they'd want to invest in a bike that sort of like at least somehow approximated the quality that they've established for their car brand, but they did not. And it's just like, I don't know, just makes me wonder what they hope to accomplish here. But maybe it's just like you say, the customers aren't cyclists who are exposed to these bikes in a dealership, and they're caught up in the moment and just buy something that some research might have suggested, if they did any, that there are some better options out there. But here we are.
Genuine question, how do you adjust the saddle height on a Ford Bronco e-bike?
I was wondering that myself. I don't see anything on it that it allows for any adjustment, but perhaps there's something we don't see that's sort of underneath, but there doesn't appear to be like a hinge or a pivoted element to that arm.
I guess
if
you're spending $4,500 US on this trash, you don't deserve to adjust your
you don't deserve comfort. Yeah, that's true.
That might be the harshest thing I've ever said, but it feels warranted at this point in time.
Yeah.
All right.
I think you're taking this too personally, Dave. They're just trying to make a dollar.
I might be. Yeah, I'm actually almost upset by this bike. So anyway, it's moving on. One I'm actually quite excited about is Forge+Bond. They're known as like the home brand of CSS composites, which is the makers of fusion fiber. So all the fusion fiber ribs from like Revel, Chris King, and the like. They make those, and Forge+Bond is their brand of wheels, and they have now extended their thermoplastic technology into a mountain bike handlebar. This one pretty cool. It's definitely more on the gravity end of the spectrum. It's 800 mil wide in stock form and can be cut down as narrow as 750 mil. But I guess that thermoplastic technology is quite cool. And what they're claiming is that versus a thermoset, more common like resin-based carbon fiber, is they get 3 times the improved vibration damping versus other bars they've tested. Pretty big claim, but I think it's an interesting one. And it's cool to see them extending the use of the technology, where it's basically a composite that can be melted back to extract the carbon fiber out of the holding composite material. So there are some recyclability options here. At the moment, I would say those options are relatively weak in that they need to get them back, and they end up turning them into chopped fiber. So they can pretty much make like a tire lever out of the stuff at the moment, but I think that will progress with time. You've got one of the tire levers?
Yes, I do. They dropped off some rims, wheel set actually, to test, as well as 2 tire levers. I have one. Yeah.
Any good? Looks sharp.
It's not the one I prefer. It's not my preferred tire lever.
Fair.
Yeah. But damn, it's cool looking, and it's fun to say I have this exotic tire lever for no reason other than to showcase the material. But the wheel set was we all test rode it. I didn't spend a lot of time on it personally, but we all could generally detect that it did feel smooth or like more muted feeling. And competitive price, weight was close to a normal, quote unquote, normal carbon wheel set. And I think that a seat post and a handlebar are places where specifically it actually makes a ton of sense, because you do get especially if you have a lot of seat posts showing, like you might on a larger bike, the sort of the more post out that you have, the sort of more significant the vibration damping characteristics become. And so I think it's a cool option as a material. Yeah.
So no, there's definitely a cool development from them, and it's obviously one handlebar for now, but I have little doubt that they'll filter this technology over. I assume making a drop handlebar out of this stuff is probably pretty difficult, but maybe one day we'll get there. But in the meantime, I think we'll hopefully see even a lighter weight cross country bar come out in the future, as maybe another brand links with them and has the demand for it. But as you say, Brad, seat post also makes a lot of sense for this technology. So fingers crossed we see it. Also new, Redshift ShockStop, the little suspension stem, elastomer-based suspension stem. they've just released a new version which comes in 2 shorter lengths than before. So they now offer that stem in a 55mm and a 70mm length option. And that's shorter than anyone else to date. So yeah, previously I think 70mm was the benchmark for a suspension stem, and Redshift has taken it a step further for gravel bikes with modern geometry.
Or people trying to convert their mountain bike frame to a drop bar for Leadville, and they need that 50mm.
Yes, if they want a suspension stem with their suspension fork.
Oh my God. But this is, in all seriousness, this is basically the same technology that exists in the BMC gravel bike that we discussed, right?
It's exactly the same.
It comes with this stem, obviously not a short one like this, but maybe the small size does. Yeah, actually. So, but yeah, it's like a little damper. It's like a bushing almost that harkens back to the Gervin Flex stem of the 90s, basically, but in a much tidier and aesthetically pleasing package. Much tidier,
yeah, less weirdness, a lot lighter. They have redesigned the stem for the shorter lengths. They're a bit more, a little bit more blocky in aesthetic now. And yeah, I think it's a cool little product. And yeah, you can adjust how firm it is. You can quickly adjust the elastomers by taking the handlebar off. But yeah, a nice little option to add some comfort to your gravel bike. And yeah, as Brad said, it is actually the same technology that BMC are equipping as stock. Redshift makes that stem for BMC and adapts it a little bit to stylize into the BMC with, you know, the hidden cabling and all that. But same bouncy technology.
I prefer this too, Dave. I would say I prefer this to like a bike with a frame and fork and stem where there's some element of suspension designed in, specialized. For example, I would much rather see like a Crux with a stem like this than a Diverge with a stem like that. You know what I mean? It's cleaner. I think it sort of accomplishes everything with much more simplicity. Yeah. So then it's a tidy little package. Looks pretty good too.
Yeah. So the only downside I'd say to these, because I've ridden them a little bit, plan to ride them more because I've actually just got my hands on one of these 70mm stems. But the one thing that annoys me is that it's just there is some change to the angle of your handlebars when it runs through its travel. A very minor, but yeah, as it loads, it does change sort of the pitch of your handlebars, and that's probably the one area where, like, you know, a much more integrated system solves, but there's a lot of trade-offs to solve that. So yeah, and it's a very effective way to add some comfort to a rigid bike, and also not terribly expensive. So, you know, you're looking about $190 for one of these, which not super cheap, but, you know, as far as features that add appreciable difference to the comfort of your ride, money well spent. Cheaper than a suspension fork, cheaper than a new bike. All right. Last on our list, this probably a bit more promotional than tech news, but if you're in Portland come the weekend of the 23rd, you should know that Made Bike Show is on. So it's kind of like the US's major handmade bike show, and yeah, it's going to be a big one. Yeah, unfortunately, I'll be missing it this year. My dad's turning 70, so priorities. But yeah, otherwise, it looks like it's going to be a great show, and I've definitely got a bit of FOMO. We hopefully will have actually Rob English, who's displaying there, also doing some coverage for us, which is a bit of an interesting one, and I'll definitely look forward to seeing what catches his eye. So that's one show to look out for. Then a weekend later, if you're in California, Above Category at their shop are actually having a secondary show. And yeah, it's basically, you know, while some of the builders, like some of the Aussie builders, especially like Bastion, Prova, Baum, I think Sato is another one, not from Australia, but that will be there. Above Categories hosting a lot of these builders for their own little, for their own small event that, for their local customers. So if you're in that area, then also be aware of that one. Titanium bikes, fancy bikes, nice custom-made bikes. There's going to be a lot to see over the next few weeks.
I just love those shows. I mean, that's where you also see a lot of really brilliant ideas emerge that are maybe ultimately adopted industry-wide, but emerge in a one-off hand-built example at a show like this. And so it's always worth following the photo sets that come out from these events, because you'll never know what idea you can't believe you never thought of that somebody finally did, and it just will blow your mind. And so that's the kind of stuff that I love about shows like that, even if some of those types of bikes aren't necessarily my cup of tea per se. And some of them definitely are, but you see all types of weird stuff, and some of it's weird and some of it's like mind-blowingly innovative and cool and maybe even state changing for the industry. So always worth paying attention to what comes out of shows like this.
Yeah, and it's not too unusual to see major product designers and brand managers from major brands walking around in disguise. Scooping the details of the show, and who knows, just industrial espionage. Yeah, seeing if there's any trends there. So always a favorite of mine, and as I said, FOMO for not going this year, but no doubt there'll be a lot of coverage coming out of that show, and there'll be some on Escape Collective, and I'll give a shout out to Radivist at this point because they do a really good job of covering the show. So anyway, shall we wrap it up there? I think that's we've gone a little over the time, but
we always do.
Hopefully it's been valuable. All right, Brad. Well, thank you. As a reminder to everyone, if you'd like to submit a question to our new Ask a Wrench segment, then you can. You just need to be a member of Escape Collective and then head to escapecollective.com/hello and you can record your question there. Bonus points for giving us the noise of the problem. Also, that leads me to just say that, as you may have noticed, we don't actually have any ads on this podcast. And if you go to our website, it's all clean and pretty without ads there either. So if you like not having ads and you understand why we don't have ads, which is to remain truly independent and remain dedicated to creating content for our readers and for our members, then please support what we do. So you can head to escapecollective.com/member, join up, sign up, and support what we do and be able to enjoy all of it as a result of that. I think that's a pretty good place to end this. So thank you. Until next week. Cheers.